Private equity is private by nature. But when private equity firms are raising a new private equity fund, they want investors to know about it. Now, how do they do that? Well, many private equity firms have relationships with investors that have invested in previous funds that they have raised. And if these funds have done well, these investors will most likely invest in those funds again. This is fairly common with institutional investors such as sovereign wealth funds, endowments, and pensions. As you remember from our video titled Canadian Pension Model Private Equity Investing, the Canada Pension Plan Investment Board, now commonly known as CPP Investments, was the largest private equity investor in the world. CPP Investments invest in private equity directly, through co-investments, through secondary investments, and of course, through funds. Now, what funds did CPP Investment invest in 2022? Well, luckily for us, this is disclosed. And in this video, we will talk about 3 firms that had funds that CPP invested in 2022. We'll talk about Baring Private Equity Asia, Permira, and Thoma Bravo. And we'll end the video with a final thought. So let's get started with Baring Private Equity Asia. CPP Investments recently invested $600 million in Baring Asia Fund 8. Wait, is that a lot? Well, Baring Asia Fund 8 raised $11.2 billion. So $600 million is a lot as an absolute number, but it's only 5% of the fund. Also, CPP Investments has invested in Baring Asia funds before, including $500 million in Baring Asia Fund 7, $333 million in Baring Asia Fund 6, and $100 million in Baring Asia Fund 5. Now that's a total of over $1.5 billion that CPP Investments has invested in Baring Private Equity Asia. Now, did you know that Baring Private Equity Asia as a firm just got purchased? Which private equity firm recently acquired Baring Private Equity Asia? Can you guess? That's right, it was EQT. Now, one can argue if it was truly an acquisition or more of a merger of private equity firms. We covered the EQT Baring Private Equity Asia deal in our September 2022 newsletter, and we're going to share that newsletter in our YouTube video next week. So please subscribe to get that video. So let's move on to Permira. Now, this is an interesting one. Permira is typically known for its buyout funds. In fact, CPP Investment has invested 1.6 billion euros in Permira's buyout funds through 325 million euros in Permira 8, 375 million euros in Permira 7, 400 million euros in Permira 6, 350 million euros in Permira 5, and 150 million euros in Permira 4. But in 2022, CPP Investments also invested 75 million euros in Permira Growth Opportunities 2. Permira, just like some other buyout firms, watched the rise in growth companies, and in 2018 started to raise its first growth equity fund. We talked about the trend of traditional buyout firms raising growth equity funds in more detail in our recent YouTube video titled Salsify Deal, example from our video newsletter. So please check that video out to learn more. Now let's move on to Thoma Bravo. CPP Investments has been investing in Thoma Bravo, the large private equity firm that invests in software and technology companies, since 2014. In fact, CPP Investments has invested approximately $2 billion over the years, including the 2022 commitment of $400 million to the Thoma Bravo 15 fund, and the most recent commitment of $200 million into a very interesting fund, the Thoma Bravo Oasis fund. Let me explain this fund further. the Thoma Bravo Oasis Fund provides liquidity to management teams and other employees that hold shares in a Thoma Bravo portfolio company. In other words, Thoma Bravo is raising a new fund, the Oasis Fund, to invest in select portfolio companies of their other funds by buying stakes from existing management teams and employees. Now, Thoma Bravo has over 70 portfolio companies at the time of this video. These are over 70 companies that Thoma Bravo has not only vetted and conducted due diligence on, but also has invested in and has access to the details of their performance. So Thoma Bravo has the benefit of cherry picking the best opportunities. On the other hand, this could be beneficial for management teams and employees, since some may want liquidity. After all, when a company is owned by Thoma Bravo, the company is private and shareholders don't have a market to sell their shares. With this Oasis Fund, management teams and employees have the opportunity to liquidate early. Now, this fund sounds great in theory, but some questions arise with this fund. They include, how will Thoma Bravo value these investments? How will Thoma Bravo choose which companies to invest in? And how will this affect morale of the management teams and employees of portfolio companies that are not chosen to be part of this fund? It'll be interesting to see how this fund plays out. Now, here's a final thought. Private equity firms are continually adapting to the demand of investors. Some private equity firms may combine with private equity firms in other regions, just like Baring Private Equity Asia did. Some private equity firms may add new strategies, such as going from being a buyout firm to a firm that also invests in growth opportunities, just like Permira did. And some private equity firms may develop new ways to invest in existing portfolio companies, just like Thoma Bravo did. Investors, are you looking to invest in private equity funds? If so, check out what sovereign wealth funds, endowments, and pensions, like CPP investments, are investing in. It's a good start to see what's out there and to see what new types of funds are being raised. In this video, we talked about 3 firms that had funds that CPP Investments invested in 2022. We talked about Baring Private Equity Asia, Permira, and Thoma Bravo. Do you know of details of other private equity funds that were raised in 2022? If so, please share them in the comments below so that other viewers can learn from your post.